In October of 2024, a Western anime licensing company known as Crunchyroll made the announcement that they'd tried to produce more short-form anime content. The stated reason being how TikTok has impacted attention spans within Gen Z. This announcement was met with immense criticism for various reasons. To me, the strongest reason is that Crunchyroll should have no part in the production of anime, given how their role should only be to bring anime to the West. That's why I personally think this wouldn't have been nearly as controversial if an anime studio or producer made this announcement. That said, I do think the concerns anime fans have with this are valid. The TikTok comparison is particularly alarming, as I've never watched a TikTok that's actually made me think in any way. Combine that with how a lot of users do some incredibly immoral things for attention, and it makes you wonder if our generation has Gyat's cooked a skibbity toilet sigma. Even so, I actually don't think that short-form content is inherently a bad thing. I'm too much of a boomer to use TikTok, but YouTube Shorts are basically the same thing, and I actually think that some good stuff does exist there. It can be in the form of a recommendation, tutorial, comedy, or shortcut cheesing Cheeseland. Again, you may think that this concept is exclusive to YouTube and TikTok, but it's actually not, as anime have produced short-form content before. As such, I wanted to give my thoughts on various different kinds of short-form anime to come to a conclusion on if Crunchyroll is right about wanting to move toward them. The answer to many would be no, and the two cases for why that is make that notion quite clear. Most short-form anime either tend to be meaningless slop, or an outright bad execution of an interesting idea. I've actually already talked about what I'd consider to be a slop anime in my CGDCT video, where I used Azur Lane Slow Ahead as an example of the negative consequences of having such a short episode length. Many people tend to criticize the CGDCT genre for being about nothing, when that's really not the case. Azur Lane Slow Ahead, however, is exactly what people who complain about CGDCT think the genre is. Ultimately, the reason why it fails is because it doesn't really offer anything unique from others within its genre. And that's why slop anime that avoid being so blatantly outclassed are ones that I can at the very least tolerate. Recently, I got really bored and started doom-scrolling Crunchyroll looking for something I could turn my brain off to, and I'd say that Oya Sanwa Shishunki did a fairly good job at that. The episodes are only 2 minutes long, so it means that pretty much no character development actually takes place. But for what it is, it's pretty wholesome. It's fun seeing these adult characters get to take a breather through seeing Chie's innocence as she helps them with mundane tasks, and seeing them return the favor by helping her acclimate more with her classmates is equally heartwarming. In a way, I'd kinda describe it as a TikTok-fied version of Spy Family. Sure, unlike Spy Family, which has genuinely interesting characters and a significantly better sense of humor, this show struggles to really compare, but the episodes are so short that I couldn't help but smile by the time I finished it. Yes, it's not good, but I didn't think it was bad either because ultimately, slop can have its place so long as it doesn't overstay its welcome. Unfortunately, I can't be as generous towards something that is outright bad, even if it has a genuinely interesting premise. I only have one example of a show like this, but that doesn't mean that I don't have a lot to say on it. One Room has the very unique idea of making you the protagonist, as the life you share with the various different girls comes to life in a 4-minute episode format. Of course, this inherently makes it a wish fulfillment fantasy, but it's not like those can't be well written. Genuinely, I was very open to the possibility that this concept could be executed well, with most of the backlash stemming from the concept instead of the writing. That's when I realized that the concept is fundamentally flawed. Given how the anime is trying to immerse you into being the protagonist, it means that you never speak throughout the series. While this works in a visual novel or JRPG, where you have the occasional dialogue option, it results in a lot of really flat dialogue in an anime format. Characters will tell you things you already would have known if not for the fact that the viewer is the protagonist. Characters will repeat things you've supposedly told them. Characters will assign you personality traits that are convenient to the plot instead of ones that are actually shown through your actions or dialogue. Pretty much every problem the show has comes from the fact that the protagonist doesn't speak. Sure, it would remove a lot of the immersion if he could speak, but giving him even the occasional line would make so much more sense and prevent a lot of what I genuinely consider to be plot holes. Since none of these characters really have anyone to bounce off of, it results in even the characters that have actual potential or good ideas for a story to be extremely disappointing. My favorite character was by far Mashiro, who had a genuinely relatable and compelling story about trying to find a job after suffering a career-ending injury. It helps that Mashiro's got a fun personality, starting off ice cold to reveal a scared and clumsy individual after the ice melts. So basically Taiga without the violence. Her story, however, isn't able to reach its full potential, both because you don't get to spend enough time with her, and because the protagonist's supposedly outgoing personality literally doesn't work when he's not allowed to speak. Mashiro's an exception though, as most other characters are just boring husks engineered in a lab to appeal to different kinds of anime fans. Even for the ones that do have more potential, which do exist, it's not like the show does anything with that potential. In a last resort, I wanted to see if the gender-swapped version of One Room, Roommate, was any better. The main difference with Roommate is that all the characters live in the same house. This comes with an upside and a downside. The good news is that we have real character interaction, now that we actually have characters who bounce off of each other, but the bad news is that the series loses a lot of its structure and feels very all over the place. All in all, I think that these shows crumble either to a lack of ambition, or having a high ambition that its format simply can't provide. So those were the mid and bad sides of short-form anime. Now, is it possible to make something good from it? Obviously, life is very complicated and nothing is ever simple. Short-form anime have worked, and the easiest way to make the idea work is through comedy. An anime that comes up surprisingly often in my work is Ueno-san wa Bukyo. As a romance, there's absolutely zero progression in Ueno and Tanaka's relationship, but that's because this is not really a romance series. It's instead an all-out comedy that cuts its episode length in half so that the humor never overstays its welcome. What makes it work is how genuinely out of pocket the jokes are. Ueno is a genius scientific prodigy who wants to use her scientific knowledge to get the oblivious Tanaka to fall for her. Ueno, however, is not mature or socially capable enough to actually understand what love is, which results in most of her ideas being very horny. Take, for example, the first joke of the series, one where Ueno demands Tanaka to drink her piss. I'm sure some people would find such insane lengths to be very discomforting, but I think this is hilarious. But of course, the humor would get very old if she could only bounce off of a block of wood. Thankfully then, it's very easy to understand why Ueno fell for Tanaka. He's the kind of innocent guy who generally tries to do the right thing, shutting down Ueno's inventions for how they'd put either one of them into an uncomfortable position. Ueno-san works because it's a comedy that never loses sight of the fact that it's supposed to make you laugh. Its episode structure is genuinely genius, and I really do think it puts it a step above many romances and comedies similar to it. I'd say the exact same thing about Space Patrol Luluko, an anime made by Studio Trigger, and boy does it show. This show is very weird, full of all the Studio Triggerisms at their finest. You have the sci-fi setting, over-the-top transformations, mechs, and a very charmingly choppy animation style, since Trigger didn't really have a budget in their early years. Even so, the visuals are very much worthy of praise, and I think it's by far the best part of the series. Yes, a lot of the animation isn't really impressive, but the sense of style is immaculate. Even by Studio Trigger standards, this has to be one of their most distinct looking shows. But in terms of the writing, while it's not the most impressive thing in the world due to the short episode length, I will say that the show is genuinely quite funny. It's fully aware of how utterly ridiculous its world building is, and having that juxtaposed to a protagonist who desperately wants to be normal is a surefire formula for laughs. The characters around her also have really great chemistry. Alpha Omega Nova is your bog standard pretty boy who Luluko crushes on despite him having no interest in her. Midori is an outright villain who gets added to the team because she said she's sorry, which genuinely has to be one of the funniest jokes in the show. To add on to the absurdity, there are many cameos from other Trigger shows, the most notable which is Inferno Cop, who is straight up one of the main characters, and his warped sense of justice makes for some of the best laughs in the show. Best of all was how pleasantly surprised I was by the last few episodes, which reveal what the deeper meaning of the story was, although I do think this show suffers from how abrupt that all feels. That doesn't even matter though, as it absolutely succeeds as a comedy, and I think the short episode length helps with that a lot. Now, at this point, we only have 2 more shows left to discuss. The final one will be my favorite to add tension to the video. However, the one I'm discussing now isn't actually a short-form anime, but rather a short-form manga that got adapted with a standard episode length. Pseudo Harem is a story about a theater kid who fulfills her crush's dream of having a harem through her acting ability. This might be one of the most novel concepts I've seen for a romance manga, although the execution itself is very unambitious, consisting of chapters that are only 4 pages in length. Even so, it's a genuinely good read that I'd recommend, being very easy to just blitz through a chapter when you have nothing better to do. Rain and AG make a very good pair, as Rain spends her time obsessing over his goofily positive attitude, while AG has a slower build to discovering his feelings toward her. While not an especially creative build, it works quite well, and I found myself smiling constantly at how cute these two are together. Unfortunately, I have mixed thoughts on the anime adaptation. As the anime commits to the standard episode length, several chapters get adapted each episode, and frankly, it makes each episode feel way too long, which results in the anime feeling much more boring than the manga. Combine this with the anime having pretty subpar production values, and the adaptation ends up being carried by Saori Hayami's incredible performance as Rain, being potentially my favorite performance from her as she seamlessly combines many roles into one character. Pretty much as a result of how insanely good that one voice acting performance is, I still would recommend the anime, but I mostly recommend it after you read the manga, since the story simply doesn't translate well into an anime of this format. If it increased its episode count while decreasing its episode length, I think the anime would have been a worthy adaptation of its source material, but alas, it's something that I have more mixed feelings on. I absolutely adore the magical girl and the evil lieutenant used to be archenemies. If my prior video on it didn't make it clear, I think that the episode length works perfectly for this series. As I've also read the manga, I can say that its format works quite well for a short episode format. In a story following the romance of a hero and villain character, most of the chapters were quite simple and focused on comedy and cute moments over anything grand. As described in my video, the manga showed a ton of potential to go down a more serious path that explores the gray areas in the character's morality, putting to question the pre-established notions of the magical girl genre. While we got glimpses of that, the manga was never able to finish due to the author's death. As a result, it'd be easy to conclude that the manga never realized its potential, that it couldn't explore the themes that it wanted to. Frankly, I think we were robbed of a potential masterpiece because all we can really do is ask, what if? While on the surface, it just ends up being a good show, with some funny moments and potential for more depth, my video saw me digging just a little bit deeper. In that video, I made the claim that the author's life experiences were a massive part of the manga's identity. That Byakuya's character arc of starting as someone who'd live any day like her last, and finding something to live for in Mira, mirrored the mangaka's as she used manga to give her life meaning all the way to the end of her life. It's when the story is read like this that it becomes something genuinely special to me, and it really makes me respect the adaptation that we got so many years later. Sure, it's flawed in the way that it doesn't take proper advantage of many of the great concepts it presents, but I can't help but just love this show. I think part of that has to do with the reception of my video about it. I had gotten into a really bad creative slump after my Justice video flopped, a video that was released right after the biggest video I had ever uploaded in my entire life. It was through giving the anime and manga the reading that I did, that I was finally able to take in why I make YouTube videos. My videos won't succeed super often because I tend to just make whatever I want, but all that matters is that I make videos that I find personally fulfilling to create, because I only make genuinely good videos when I love doing what I do. Funnily enough, it was after re-uploading that video after a copyright takedown that it had blown up, and I'm very grateful for that, because I would not be where I'm at now without it. And to this day, I'd still call it the best video I've ever made. But what was the point of all this? Well, I think the point is to say that the fear of short-form content, while valid, has definitely been taken out of proportion. In the beginning of the video, I brought up how TikTok has promoted a borderline psychotic behavior in people. However, TikTok isn't inherently bad. A TikTok may not be as good as a YouTube video, but that doesn't mean it lacks a place in our creative environment. I'm sure all of you would agree that a short Garfield comic couldn't compare to your favorite comics of manga, but it isn't trying to. Say what you want about a Garfield comic, but at its core, it's still trying to make its reader happy. The problem with many TikToks is that many people make entertainment at the expense of others, doing so without the careful planning that someone like a comedian would use. But if someone's making a YouTube short trying to make you laugh without that mean spirit, then is it really doing anything wrong? This isn't to say that the idea of short-form content replacing long-form content doesn't scare me, because deep down it does, but I just had to be reminded that having any audience at all means that at least someone will stick with what I have to say. Fear of the unknown is normal and natural, but that doesn't mean you should let it consume you. That's ultimately why I found that people overreacted to the statement from Crunchyroll. I may not like what they had to say about the current state of media, but I also have to acknowledge that the idea of more short-form anime existing isn't entirely a bad idea. Sure, the execution is mostly lackluster, but there are some gems out there, and even diamonds in the rough. The goal of this video isn't really to change your mind, since I don't have the ego to assume I'm actually convincing. It's instead to offer a different perspective, to perhaps think in a more positive light, even when it's difficult. Crunchyroll is a shit company, though, let's not sugarcoat that one. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this one. I won't lie when I say that I'm not really a huge fan of this video. It's not like I think it's outright bad, but more so that I feel like I'm just going through the motions at this point. It'd take me too long to talk about it here, however, so I plan on making a post for it so even the people who didn't watch this video can get caught up with where I'm at right now. I will say one thing though, and it's to keep your attention toward me. I will make sure that the next video surpasses any and all expectations, so I hope you guys are excited for what's to come next. But of course, a video like this would not be possible if it weren't for the support of my wonderful Phantom tier patron Squizzy, and my Confidant tier patrons Regimania and Eternum. If you want to add your name to the list, as well as get plenty of other benefits such as a private Discord server, over 300 scrapped video ideas, 500 unlisted videos, early access to my videos, previews of upcoming videos, and my entire Google Drive, you can find it on Patreon. I also have a final tier that no one's bought yet, so perhaps you could be the first name there. While donations are the best way to keep the channel going, views, likes, and comments help a ton as well. No matter which one of these people you happen to be, I thank you for watching the video, and I'll see you all next time.